All right. So we've looked at evidence that we've seen for natural selection. We've looked at fossils, homologies, synapomorphies. There's more. All right. Let's talk about some of the other people who have done research on natural selection and discovered more homologies. Heinz Christian Pander, another European white dude, discovered that chick embryos, he was working on chickens, that in early in embryonic development, the embryo developed into these three layers of cells: an ectoderm, a mesoderm, and an endoderm. Ecto means outer, and meso means middle, endo means inner. And derm means root. And so what he found, he named these germ layers, and he found that all vertebrate embryos had these same germ layers. And in fact, today we know that these germ layers do develop in this structure, the gastrula, which is embryonic development period. And in all vertebrate animals, the ectoderm develops into the skin and the nervous system. The mesoderm develops into the spinal cord, or the vertebral column, the bones, parts of the kidney, blood cells, and some of the head. The endoderm develops into your digestive tract, your pharynx, your respiratory system. And then there are other separate cells that will develop that will be germ cells in all vertebrate animals, which suggests that all vertebrate animals have a common ancestor and that this system developed in the common ancestor and kept working. It was passed down, and everything that derived from that had this same system. Carl Ernst von Baer studied the embryos of a bunch of different vertebrates, concluded that they all looked really similar. He came to the wrong conclusion. Common theme here. He believed that the characteristics of different evolutionary groups, what we call taxa, that these characteristics developed early and then species-specific characteristics developed later in embryonic development. For that, he was called the father of embryology, even though he was wrong. He didn't believe in evolution. He thought God made everything this way. Ernst Haeckel compared embryonic development in many different species. He's another bad scientist. He concluded that the development of the embryo shows the development of the species. So he did believe in evolutionary theories, and he thought that the embryo goes through the pathway of the evolution of its species as it's developing. He was absolutely wrong about that. He was convinced, though, and so he actually changed some of his diagrams to support his hypothesis, which is bad. That is bad science. It's not how science is supposed to work. He was exposed. Some people are like, Haeckel was wrong, and so Haeckel, faked his drawings, and so everything about embryonic development that he said is wrong. Well, no, you can't throw out everything. You can go back and look at embryos and see that embryos of many different vertebrate species look very similar and that they have common traits. So this is a fish, a salamander, a tortoise, a chicken, a rabbit, and a human. Yes, I know it says man because a man made this diagram. But all vertebrates have common embryological structures. Gill slits. Yes, you had gill slits as an embryo. I know. Blew my mind when I learned that. A tail, a head at one end, a tail at the other. And then the other thing that we see in all vertebrates is a notochord, which becomes the vertebral column, and a nerve cord that develops into a brain at one end. If you click on this link, you will go to a quiz where you can try to figure out what embryo is which based on the embryos. It's very difficult. I can't do it. So what does that tell us? That suggests, again, that there was a common ancestor that had these embryological traits, and that as organisms diverged, the embryological development diverged with it, but these common traits remained. Again, this is evidence for a common ancestor. Now, notice that I'm saying this is all evidence for. None of this definitively proves it. But when you put all of this evidence together, you prove that, yes, this is common ancestry. Other support. All living organisms have DNA. All DNA molecules are made up of the same 4 nucleotides. In every living organism on the planet, DNA is the same. It's just HCGT, 4 nucleotides in every single organism. Every organism on Earth uses that DNA as instructions to make proteins with ribosomes. Every single organism on Earth makes proteins the same way. Every living organism has a plasma membrane. That plasma membrane is made of phospholipids. Every single organism on Earth, which suggests that life itself has common ancestry in a cell-like thing that had a plasma membrane, DNA, and RNA inside. Does it prove that? No. But again, we've been researching this for 150 years, and we haven't disproven common ancestry. There is no evidence that points to some other explanation. There is only evolution by natural, evolution specifically and most commonly evolution by natural selection. All right, so to review, natural selection selects against individuals. Because there is variation, not everybody's the same, traits can be inherited, and not all individuals reproduce, and not all offspring survive. So individuals that reproduce pass on the traits that helped them reproduce. And so if you don't get to reproduce, you are selected against. If you choose not to reproduce, you are selected against. Which is why the desire for sex is really common among living things, because things that don't reproduce, well, they get selected against. Traits that are advantageous, that cause organisms or help organisms reproduce in their environment, those traits get passed along. Fitness, evolutionary fitness, is the ability to pass on your genes to the next generation. It is not strength. It is not greed. The social Darwinists are totally wrong. Being mean and greedy and rich does not give you fitness. Having lots of kids gives you fitness. The Duggar family, extreme evolutionary fitness. That's 19 kids and now grandkids. That is a lot of evolutionary fitness, far more than me. I had identical twins. So I only passed on one set of DNA. Like it's the same DNA in 2 individuals. I have very low evolutionary fitness. My great aunt had no offspring. She had 0 evolutionary fitness. Okay. Fitness is only the ability to pass on your genes. Just passing on your genes, that's all. That is something I definitely need you to understand. All right, so what is an adaptation? An adaptation is a trait that increases a species' likelihood for survival and reproduction, and adaptations are environmentally specific. Okay. Now, a species adapts, an individual does not adapt. An individual is not going to develop a new trait Okay, except by mutation, and you might develop a mutation before you're born. You're not going to develop a mutation in your nuclear DNA after you're born. Okay, it's a new mutation in you, but during embryonic development, probably in the egg or sperm. Okay, and you remember a mutation is just a change in the DNA. Might be good, might be bad, might be nothing. If it's an advantageous mutation, then it will help you survive and reproduce, and it will be passed on to your offspring if that chromosome is the one that gets passed on. All right. Nature selects from the organisms with the beneficial traits, and the species adapts to the environment as advantageous traits become more common. Adaptations are specific to a certain environment. One of the reasons that scientists think that the Neanderthals died out is that they had a much larger torso, a much larger, especially rib cage. And when Northern Europe was in an ice age, that was very advantageous because that helped them retain heat in their body and keep their organs warm. As Northern Europe cooled off, that extra large heat storage area became disadvantageous. Now, we actually know that Neanderthals interbred with modern humans, and so European humans in particular do have Neanderthal genes, almost all do. So whether they died out or whether they interbred, still kind of an ongoing question. All right, so what's true? Organisms become adapted to their environment over many generations. Organisms do not improve. They do not become more perfect. They become good enough. Okay, remember when we talked about photosynthesis and rubisco is a really inefficient enzyme? It's good enough for photosynthesis to work, and so that's what plants use for photosynthesis because the common ancestor of plants used rubisco. Okay. If there could be a mutation for a better enzyme, that might be advantageous enough to get passed on, but no plant has done that. Nature does not care. Nature doesn't care whether a trait is advantageous. It doesn't care what an organism needs. It doesn't care what is morally right. Nature is a blind and random set of laws and processes. So, yes, birds having wings, the development of wings is advantageous so that birds can fly, but birds didn't develop wings because they needed to fly away to escape predators. A pre-bird organism that had feathers and wide skin flaps under its arms was maybe able to jump from a tree and glide and escape a predator. That became an advantageous trait that was passed on. So don't say that evolution happens because of something that is needed. Don't say that evolution happens because of something that is good. Don't say that things improve or become more perfect. And don't say that any organism alive today is more evolved than any other. All organisms alive on the earth today are the result of the same amount of time of evolution happening. They're all the same amount evolved. So there's no greater or lesser amount of evolution that has happened. There are organisms that emerged or evolved more recently, but the common ancestor of all life is at the same place. Humans are a fairly new organism on the planet. Modern humans are only about 1 million years old. Horses and zebras are like 10 million years old. So just keep that in mind. Evolution happens very slowly, and nobody is more evolved than anyone else. Some organisms are more recently diverged from a common ancestor. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, so that is our lecture about evolution. I hope you enjoyed that. In the next set of lectures, I'm going to talk about evolutionary mechanisms, some other mechanisms specifically, and then we're going to talk about how we measure whether evolution is happening.